Well, first of all, Hayes, you are going to have a really hard time wiping this smile off my face. It is so good to see you after all of these years. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, I'm so glad to be here, Ann, and wonderful to reconnect.
So, can we go all the way back to 1996 when I was a freshman and you were working at Lovett and we were standing on that grassy hill outside the classrooms? And I remember you talking about how you were going to start Moondance. Can you take us back there? How did you even get the idea for Moondance?
I'm going to back it up a little bit because it was before 95. So I left Lovett in 95. So I made a decision in actually the fall of 94 to leave because I was chasing an old summer camp. I was trying to buy an old summer camp in North Carolina. And I've been working on this. I've been able to raise money for this. And this was my dream. My grandparents owned a summer camp in northern Wisconsin. So wanted to get into the business, loved it. Hence, that's how I got to love it in the first place. And as a matter of fact, Sam Rothermel, I don't know if you remember Sam Rothermel, was my counselor. He was in the upper school at Lovett. He was my counselor when I was 8 years old. So anyway, the property that I was trying to buy fell through on Friday the 13th of October, 1995, and they sold it to somebody else. And I thought, what am I going to do? The sun came up the next day. That's when I had this idea for a adventure program, and that's when I put this together for Moondance. And so the concept of Moondance didn't really, it almost came out of sink or swim. And the idea that I'd always had would be to own a traditional summer camp. And I was, because my grandparents had this place in Wisconsin, and being a Southerner, I wanted to be in the Southeast, hence North Carolina, but that fell through, and this has turned out to be a lot better.
So, once you decided that you wanted to start an adventure program for teens, how did you actually get it up and running?
Well, part about a lot of this is sink or swim, right? Just as I said, either I had to make something happen, or I was going to have to find something else to do. So I had this idea, shared it with a girlfriend at the time who was with Anderson Consulting. She wasn't crazy about the idea, but I also met with another friend of mine, Marcia Hill, who ended up saying, "Okay, this is what we're going to do," and boom, boom, boom. And this is in a week later, we had a name, we had a business idea, we had a concept, putting together a business plan, and we had the first year. So that was probably November of 95. And then we operated first summer in 96. 34 kids ended up going. Well, not quite sure whether we're going to make it to year two, but we had a great time on year one. And, but year two ramped it up, and then it ramped it up a little bit more the year after that. And then once we started traveling internationally, it's really kind of taken off since then.
Well, so 1995, 1996, I mean, Google was hardly a thing,
Google was
and
not a thing. Google was not a thing.
websites were not really a thing. So, how did you get anyone to even know about your business?
So I had a couple catalogs from one of our a couple of our competitors. So that was it. So there was no Google, there was no search at all, and it was you just try to figure it out. So the best way to do this was just it was that word of mouth. So I had the connections that love it, had the connections in the South, I had the connections in North Carolina where I'm originally from, and then just getting the word out and spread it. So my cousins own the camp up in Wisconsin. We got a handful of kids out of there, some kids from Lubbock, kids from Westminster, and then a smattering of kids from around the country. Great kid out of Chicago, another kid out of Dallas. Um, I'm not quite sure where they found out about us because it was really, really hard back then. I wasn't. I traveled a little bit in the South, just making presentations in Atlanta and Charlotte and Nashville and Birmingham, but I wasn't traveling the country at the time. So I'm not quite sure where a handful of those found us, but they did find us, and I think they all had a pretty good time, and a lot of them came back, and then they brought their friends.
So it must have been word of mouth. And with the 34 kids signing up, I mean, this was all new to you, right? You'd never run a program like this by yourself?
Never. No. And I had led, I'd taken groups of kids from Lovett when I was there on various trips, but never putting together a business, never understanding all the intricacies that come from running a business, from the risk management to the legal to the everything that entailed all that. It was a little bit of survival. So I'm not sure if you talk to some of your small business owners over there going, I'm not really sure what was going on that first year. We just had to survive. And what I didn't know, uh, didn't hurt me at all because I didn't know a lot and about all of that. So I ended up making it, made it work, and then and I think where it really kind of turned for us was really understanding the hospitality piece of working with people and working with kids and I'd always loved that when I was at Lovett. I always loved the kids and I loved the parents and I didn't always love the administration or just the politics of a private school. So being on my own was great. And then I had a handful of folks that believed in me and said, "Okay, this might work." And but again, it's hard to make a small business operate in year 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, and but we were able to get to year 2. And of course, in '96, it was the Olympics in Atlanta. So I thought we would get all these kids from Atlanta, and we did. We got handful, got Whitney and a handful of other folks that ended up joining us. But after that, then that word started spreading, and then by '97, '98, '99, we were able. We really kind of took off then.
So what was that first summer actually like? Like, I'm sure that there were some hiccups. I mean, nobody starts a business and has it be smooth sailing. So what was it actually like?
It was hindsight. What was going on? I mean, the trailer popped off the van. That's the first bump that we hit over there, and they're going, "Oh my gosh, we've got to be able to do that." So, but we operated in North Carolina. Had two groups that went to North Carolina. We split up. Matter of fact, one of the my co-leaders, a girl named Casey Krim Marshall, who went to Lubbock. So Casey was my co-leader, and then we had another group. They went one direction, we went the other direction. This 2 week trip in North Carolina. Then I went out to Wyoming to Jackson Hole, and we had two groups out there. Whit was on that first one, and then JoJo was on the second one, and ended up having small groups, probably 7 to 8 kids, backpacking in the Tetons, which was great. We didn't have permits. Don't I'm not sure that you can let everybody know
It's
that
been
we did
long
have
enough.
permits. Yeah, so that 30-year
Statute of
period of time has
limitations, it's
that's
over.
gone. That's
Yeah.
gone. But we operated, wanted to make sure the kids had a great time, a lot of fun, but also a lot of challenge. And my background was not only at Lovett in the camp business, but I did it Knowles course, the National Outdoor Leadership School and Outward Bound course, and took some of those concepts into it. Quickly realized that's not what kids really wanted. Kids wanted to connect. Kids wanted to be challenged. Kids also wanted to have fun. And you could do all that without having to really be something that's so physically hard that they said, "Oh, I never want to do that again."
Mm.
And so probably 55% of those kids ended up coming back for a second trip. That first year, Wade Morris, if you remember Wade, was
Oh, yeah.
on that trip.
Yeah.
So it is learning all those lessons. But the other thing too, Andy, I didn't know a whole lot about business, and so I was trying to figure out what was going on. So not only was I reading, but it was business school in real time, and trying to figure out, okay, how do you make payroll and how do you take care of everybody, and but again, I did know a lot, which was probably helpful because if I'd known a lot, I probably wouldn't be doing this. And that's the kind of the great part about it. I think sometimes are you entrepreneurial? Is everybody that way? I'm not quite sure, but what I did know since I was 18 is that I wanted to get into the kid business. I wanted to be in the summer camp business. I was 19 at the time. So after my freshman year of college, I knew that's the direction I wanted to go. So I understood the camp business, but I didn't understand this business as much. And so that helped me at least having those years over there working with kids and but it is again, I mean, 30 years into it, and I'm still not a great businessman, but we're in business for 30 years,
I
and
I think
so
I think you are a better businessman than you are acknowledging.
well, we'll see. So, but it's been a fun run.
So when you mentioned the hospitality piece as something that you wanted to bring in, what do you mean?
So that Maya Angelou quote, how do people feel when you walk away? It's not exactly what Maya Angelou said, but it is one of those things. There's a guy named Danny Meyer if you're familiar with Danny Meyer,
Yeah, he went to my college.
he did.
He went to Trinity College. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So Danny's done a marvelous job. He really talks about hospitality quite a bit. And there's another guy that worked for him named Will Garita that wrote a book called Unreasonable Hospitality that just came out a couple years ago. It's a fabulous book. But once I saw that, and once we started focusing more on what's that service piece like, and what's the hospitality piece like, and how do people feel, and not just the kids, but how do the leaders feel? Are they taken care of? And how do the parents feel? Are they communicated enough? Because in our business, it's a little bit roots and wings, and so parents give those kids those roots, but they've got to let them spread the wings in order to find out what's going on. So there's not daily communication with the parents, and they had a hard time with that. They had to trust me, they had to trust us, they had to trust our system that we were doing everything right and their kids were safe. And but they were also changed. And so when you go climb a big mountain, or you go on a longer adventure of a backpacking trip, or a rafting trip, it's a little something that comes from that.
Well, and so back then, you didn't have to worry so much about, I guess, letting the kids spread their wings because the technology, cell phones didn't really exist. Well, they did maybe,
They
but they were
they
like
did
this,
not.
they did
They
not
did
really
not.
exist.
They did not. They
So,
did
what
not.
is your perspective on devices and how do you handle this with teens
Oh, it's
probably
simple.
wanting to bring them on the trips?
Everybody has a smartphone. Every single kid has a smartphone. And so a couple thousand kids, we take the phones up as soon as they arrive. So they text their parents, "I'm here," and then we take them up. And they do
Nice.
not, they don't touch their phone until they walk through security on the way out at the end of the trip, and they love it. And parents have a harder time with that than the kids do, but kids love it. And oftentimes where they get their phone back, said, I don't want my phone back. I like being able to talk to other people, and it's become a bigger problem year after year. It's become a bigger and bigger problem. So what it was like in 2010 is completely different than it is now, and so kids are that's probably one of the best things for them. The other thing that we do, which is really great, is we take their watches away so they don't know what time it is.
Oh my
So we talk about living in the moment. So think about
yes.
this too, Andy. So we think about, so our greatest competitor is time. And so time is fleeting for a teenager, or for a young adult, or for an older adult. And if we take that concept of, okay, you had this little window of time and then it's going to be gone. And so 2 weeks is a small amount of time. And they talk about, if you live to be 80, you might get 30,000 days out of your life. 30,000 days. So we're talking 14. And what we're trying to do in that 14 days is give them something that's so impactful that in 10 years or 25 years, they're still talking about what that experience might have been like. As we go through this, we all know that we forget a lot of stuff. We forget a lot of things that happen to us. Some things might trigger that. What we try to do is try to give them a moment of time, a memory of that moment that they reflect back on years later. And it could be anything. It could be, hiking up in Alaska. It could be climbing a big mountain. It could be hanging out with some some kids that you just met and becoming really, really close with them.
This is incredible work that you're doing because I think that, especially with the rise of technology, kids are getting more and more disconnected and realizing that it's not what makes them happy. But the technology is also built to be so addictive that they can't really step away from it unless somebody does actually take it off their hands. So, my gosh, thank you so much for doing what you're doing.
Well, we ask parents in a follow-up evaluation. 100% of the parents support that decision. And I would say almost 100% of the kids support that decision. They want to have an excuse to not have their phone with them. I have a 19-year-old, and yeah, I see the addiction right there. And they'll sit in a room with a bunch of other kids and they're texting back and forth. They're not even talking. And so communication is critical. And so we take the phones up and allow them to talk. And so it might take them a day or two to kind of warm up. What is this like? What do you mean we're going to sit around? We're going to talk about some of this stuff, and that's really really helpful for them to be able to talk about. And the other thing too, Andy, that has been great is that we allow one friend to go, but we don't allow you to go with two friends. And so you might be able to, so you feel a little bit insecure, or you feel like you need to take a buddy with you. You can take one, but you can't take two friends, meaning that you're going to meet 10 new kids.
Great.
And that concept has been from the get-go. And so we had all these kids out of out of the Buckhead area that wanted to go together, and I, I wasn't going to take everybody. And that was a decision that I made up right off the bat. And if we failed, that was the decision I was comfortable about leaving with. I didn't want to take everybody that knew each other because when you don't know each other, you actually are more open to talk
Mm.
about things that happen to you as opposed to being with a bunch of friends that know you really, really well.
Yeah, I can see all of the benefits. I mean, getting pushed outside of your comfort zone just a little bit. And as you're saying, like feeling open because nobody knows anything about you. So when you have like a group of teenagers, most of who don't know each other together for the first time without their devices, what do you do about getting them to know each other and breaking the ice so that you can kind of get on with the trip?
It's easy. The all kinds of different games that they can end up playing just to know each other, and it might take a day or two. So this is what I've seen. So you have two sisters and a brother, right?
Uh huh. Yeah.
So the girls are much more open about relationships, about meeting new people. Guys are a little bit standoffish, and so the girls will be right there, bringing everybody in and bringing the group together, getting to know everybody's names and getting to know each other in that first 24 hours. We do all kinds of things to try to get to know each other, but sometimes it might take those boys a day or two, or sometimes 5 or 6 days to kind of get out of that shell. And all of a sudden they realize, hey, this is pretty good. And I can share some things that I think about, but I've never been able to tell anybody. I can't tell my parents, I can't tell my friends, I can't. And all of a sudden they're telling these other kids on their trip. And so the group dynamics, the shared experience is the magic that happens out there. And when you get kids together, all of a sudden you put them on a belay line, or they're out there, whether they're rock climbing and somebody has to support them over there, or they're in a boat and they're having a paddle and everybody on the left side has to paddle together, and just all these little things that when you're active helps you out. And then if you go out backpacking, sometimes it's kind of tough. So the best thing to do when you're backpacking is talk and to talk to each other. And that's a cool concept for kids to figure out, is that they're having these conversations and finding out from these other people that they just met the day before. And by day 12 or 13, they're crying because they hate to say goodbye. And it happens time and time again. So it's something that kids need, and moving forward, I believe strongly that it's something that they will look back on and look back on fondly, and hopefully this will go on for another 30 plus years.
Yeah, there is something I think they've even studied this about being in the outdoors that way, what it does to your nervous system and just how good it is for the body. I I imagine that you have been to I don't know how many countries at this point. What stands out to you as some of your most memorable experiences and trips from running all of your different trips through Moondance?
Well, I was very fortunate to travel a good bit, and one of the things that I talk about is, when you go to some place that's so spectacular that you're planning to come back before you've actually left. That's pretty good. So So East Africa is pretty special to me. I've been fortunate to have gone a number of times, and I've been up Kilimanjaro a couple different times. My daughter climbing it last summer was very special to me. Although I was not there, it was probably one of the most proud moments of my life, just knowing, because it's pretty tough physically. Um, but what I love to do also is just to go out and see kids and see them in their element and see what's going on over there. There's a there's a very humbling experience as an older owner of the business, going over there and hanging out with a bunch of teenagers and then going, okay, who's the old man over here? And then once we warm up a little bit, it's okay. But there's also, I don't want to detract from their experience. And so I was fortunate to climb the Grand Teton a bunch of times, or Mount Rainier a bunch of times with some kids, and that experience was pretty special. But probably the most impactful is just going out and seeing kids at different times of their trip and just spending a little bit of time with them. And then when they come back as trip leaders, that's special also. And it is it's as I continue to travel, I traveled to Europe a couple times last summer, saw about 12 different groups in Slovenia and Croatia and Madeira and Morocco, and that was all, it's part of the perks of being a business owner.
Oh my gosh, you picked the best business ever. I can
I love it.
I
Love it.
love it, and I don't even do it. I wish I were doing what you're doing. And so now you are in your what, 29th or 30th season?
Going into our 30th season. Yep.
30th season, and you mentioned, like, over 2,000 kids traveling. I think you guys cover several continents and several countries, it
So
sounds like.
five continents, 21 countries, 11 states.
How have you done this? Like, you mentioned getting trip leaders who were previous participants, but how else are you putting this all together? I mean, it's seasonal, and then it sounds like an influx of leaders and students and logistics, and how are you doing this?
Well, I'm not doing it on my own. I'll tell you that is one of the most important things that I did early on is realize that I need some other people involved to help us get that going. So there are 18 full-time folks over here right now. So it is a seasonal business. We operate from June until the end of July, but we're full-time. And so we kick off our new season about 2 weeks after we complete the previous season. And so we've got gosh, we had about 1,000 kids that signed up in the first 30 minutes last year, and it
Oh my
crashed our
god.
website, and we changed that whole structure up of how we're doing that, and that was great. Um, but I have a team that dedicated just to the admissions. I have a team that's just dedicated just to the operations. I have a team that's just dedicated to staffing. I have a finance team that's dedicated to all that, and I'm just kind of uh, massaging all of that, make sure that it's all coming together and working well. So it's not been without some challenges and a lot of bumps along the way, but having the system set up over there where everybody knows what they need to take care of, and it works well.
Well, it sounds like it has just continued to grow since you first started and must be working well. If with 18 people working full time, how many are working during the peak for June and July?
Every single one, every
And
single,
then leaders
and
though, how
and then,
many
and then
leaders do you
100
have?
we had about 170 last summer,
Oh my gosh. This is amazing.
and they're all remarkable folks. And the model for finding the leaders has been a little bit uh, different over the years. And so my originally going after more of those that had the hard skills of being able to operate in a backcountry type setting, realizing that that's not, you need some of those, but you also need those with the really soft skills. And so some of our trips are not as physically challenging. So going to Africa, to Tanzania, to Zanzibar may not be having the hard skills, but you have to have the people skills, you have to have the communication skills, you have to have the leadership skills in order to manage all that. So we go to a lot of we're Chapel Hill, and we go to UVA and WNL and Georgia and Vanderbilt and a lot of great schools recruiting trip leaders. And then we have some that are in the seasonal business that might have gotten out of college and maybe working in the ski industry or something that they might have another summer available. But typically by the time they're 24, 25, they've aged out. And we have a couple that are a little bit older than that.
And then have you ever had a situation where a leader was a no-show?
We've never had a leader that's a no-show. We had a leader that withdrew 2 weeks before the summer started, and which was a little disappointing, but it was a great opportunity for us to realize, um, and we always have enough folks over there to be able to do that. But he took a job 2 weeks before the summer started. He had just graduated from college, took a job, and he fortunately still with the same company. This has been 5 years ago, but he still is best friends with all these guys and gals that work for Moondance. And so he has a connection to Moondance, but he doesn't because he didn't end up working. But we will be very stringent on folks that come in. So if we have 170, we had 3 or 4 that didn't make it through staff training last year. We just realized, okay, they weren't the right fit. And we made a change. And during the summer, sometimes those things happen. So we have a surplus of trip leaders that we can pull and move some folks around. But there were 100 and I think last summer we had 172 different trips operating around the world, and this summer we'll have 200.
Wow. And if there's anybody that's younger listening in who is curious about possibly being a leader, what does it require and how extensive is the training that they get?
The interview process, well, the application process is twofold. So the original application comes in. If they are strong enough, they get the full application. If it's not, then we'll just politely say this may not be the right fit. We get right now we have we'll have as I said about 170. We probably have 75 already on board that are hired. We have probably 250 applications
Wow.
already. We'll probably get another 150 to 200 after the first of the year. So we'll have roughly 500 applications for about, I say 170 spots, but 60 to 70 of those will be taken up by folks from last year. So about 500 applications for about 100 new positions this year. And so it's really pretty great to be able to go through this. They'll go through um, three interviews before me, and then I do the fourth interview. And another wonderful thing, the woman that's overseeing our staffing team, Suzanne Hollis, is a Lovett graduate, fantastic, unbelievable woman, and but she's the one that kind of spearheads all that. So they don't even get to me until they've already confirmed that they are phenomenal, and I'm the fourth interview, and that's either to make a trip leader, or maybe it's not the right fit. So but we've been very fortunate, and it's all about the people that you're working with, and it's all about who we bring on board. And so we'll take everybody to North Carolina. We'll train them for 2 weeks. We spend 2 weeks at a traditional camp over there, and then go through everything from sun up to sundown every day, and just learning how we operate. We'll spend 4 days of a simulated trip in the Pisgah National Forest, if you remember the Joe trip, and
Yeah.
so that's somewhat of that. And then they end up coming back to Nashville. We'll spend a couple days here, and it's like throwing a pebble in a pond, and then people scatter all over the world from the Nashville International Airport.
What an incredible leadership opportunity for any of these kids to get to do.
Tell them, tell them.
Oh my
All that.
gosh.
It's
I want my
amazing leadership
kids to
opportunity.
do this. I really do.
So let me tell you a quick story, not to get off this. So there was that travel snafu last year, right? It was in latter part of July, early, I think it's the latter part of July. Do you remember this? There was a Microsoft
Oh, yes,
glitch that
yes.
threw everybody off.
Yeah.
So Delta Airlines said no unaccompanied minors were able to fly. Well, we had 60 kids that came from Belize into
Oh my gosh.
Hartsfield Airport, and I had three trip leaders with them. They were all seniors in college. One was going to law school. One was the president of her university, and another dynamic woman. Long story short, they were able to maneuver all 60 of these kids onto a flight after Delta Airlines said no unaccompanied minors could get on there. They got every single kid home that day. So I wrote them pretty quickly. I didn't even know about this because I was flying back from Africa, and I didn't know about this until they had gotten everybody. And I said, this may be the most important leadership position that you have been in at this point in your life. I believe that because they were able to talk Delta Airlines into letting these kids go. And so, yes, it's about problem solving, it's about decision making, it's about leadership. And we're in the outdoor and the kid business, but there's so much more to the job than just leading kids in an outdoor environment.
Yeah, there is, and they just like they are creating an experience for the kids to never forget, they themselves as leaders, I am sure, are also experiencing moments that they will never forget. So, this all sounds incredible. I know behind the scenes there is stuff that everybody else doesn't see. Like, how do you handle liability insurance and risk management?
Well, the insurance and risk management are both massive over there. So we have a team over there, our risk management team. We attend a conference every year, working directly with the National Outdoor Leadership School, and now we're bound to some other folks. And so we attend this every year. The liability we is quite extensive, as you can well imagine. But we also
Yeah.
work with an insurance company that's dealing in the outdoor industry, and so they understand what we're doing, and that we're traveling internationally, and that we might be engaged in activities that it might be a little bit challenging when they look at whether it be whitewater rafting or mountaineering, might seem a little bit daunting. One of the things that we've also done is that we subcontracted all these professional guides and outfitters and all the destinations where we go. So we are not taking care of all the actual setting up the ropes with for actually rock climbing. We're not setting up the boats over there. We subcontract that with somebody else that's taking care of all that.
And how do you find your subcontractors? So, is this how do you vet them?
Again, going over there, meeting them one on one. We've got a better system set up now than we did back in '96 because we had no idea who we were going to be able to work with. So we'll go through this. I'll have a conversation with them. I meet them personally. I just went to Africa to meet some new outfitters
Amazing.
that we're going to work with. Yeah, it's part of the job. And but it is one of those things. It's about trust. So parents are trusting us. I'm trusting our leaders. I've got to be able to trust the outfitters that we're working with. And so sometimes they don't make it, and if they don't hold up to our standards, since we have this really thorough document about everything that has to go through and how we operate and how we want them to communicate with our kids, and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And um but we've got some amazing people that we work with all over the world, and continue to have those relationships. I mean, there are a handful of companies we've been working with. This is our 30th year working with them.
Wow. And you've mentioned Africa a few times now, and you did say that East Africa has got such a meaningful place in your heart. What is it about East Africa that makes it so special to you?
Have you been to Africa?
No.
It is the most magical, and it is. My daughter has been 6 times
Oh my
at
god.
19 years of age. I know it. I know it. Um, there's something about just the raw um, nature of being out in the bush and seeing the wildlife. And so I just took my sister as a plus one, and we had a big male lion that was looking for shade and came right up next to our vehicle, and he was 2 feet away from my sister. We could hear him breathing. You get the flies on his back, and it was so real and so magical for her. It's every time I go, it's emotional when I say goodbye. I mean, I'm a 60-year-old guy that's in tears saying goodbye to our guides and our outfitters over there. It's something that's kind of hard to describe until people go. But once they go to Africa, it's hard to say, okay, I want to go someplace else. And so Southern Africa, we've been a number of times. We were there just when COVID kicked in, and we weren't sure when we were going to go back. And I've been to Africa 4 times the last 12 months.
Sounds like you might need to start having a foot permanently based there.
I might have to go over there. So I was in Morocco a couple times, and I was in Botswana, and I was ended up going to Tanzania and Mozambique and South Africa just in October.
Incredible. What a life. So, when it comes to like designing a new location and a new program, that a place you've never done before, what is the process?
So we've got an incredibly cool concept on this. So the process used to be that we'd go someplace that we'd like to go, and we'd send a scouting team to go over there and walk the walk, meet all the outfitters. So what we've done now, Annie, is that we have what's called a mystery trip. I don't know if you've seen this or not. So we have it. So a guy came up with this idea for a mystery trip. So essentially, kids sign up for it on the first day. We open enrollment in August, and it sells out the first day. It's 12 kids, and it's this year it's about $12,000. And what they do is they're going to go to a destination, but they're not going to find out, even though they sign up in August, they're not going to find out until July 8th, the following year, where that is. And so they're in the Atlanta airport, and they'll put a puzzle together, and then they'll take off. And so last year, my daughter was on the mystery trip, and they ended up going to Ladakh in India. It's in northern India. It's
Oh
in the
my
Himalayas.
gosh. I know Ladakh. I haven't been there, tried to go, but yeah.
So it is a distance to get
Wow.
there, and they had never been. So they were trekking at 17,000 feet. We found out the trip was a little too hard, and a little too. It didn't fit our vibe. But we've had other mystery trips in Slovenia, Madeira. That's been blowing up. Madeira's off the coast of Portugal,
I was
and
just
it's
about to
it's
ask this.
become it's a magical destination, and nobody knew where it was. And so when we revealed that, we saw people pulling out their phones, going, "Where's Madeira?" And so we have 100, and I think we have 120 kids going to Madeira this summer, and Slovenia's been a great spot. We've been to other places that we thought might work out, like in Chile, but it was the weather was too harsh during the summer months for us, and but that concept has worked out pretty well. And so we've got an idea, but nobody knows about it except the office. And so everybody signs an NDA. Nobody can speak a word of where we're going until July 8th, and then we posted. We'll be in the airport, and we'll post something on Instagram, and but that concept has been great. So one of the things that I learned is you don't need a lot of trips. You need the right trips. So you don't have to have everything. So sometimes people go through and think that, oh, you have to have 50 or 70 or 80 trips, and no, you don't. But you can scale those trips and make them fine tune and make them better and better. And that seems to have worked really, really well. And so a number of our trips are have sometimes as many as 9 groups. One trip has 15 different groups that go out during the summer at different times. It's staggered during the summer, and the group size is 12 and two, so 12 kids and two leaders. So we don't ever rarely get larger than that. But it's worked out nicely that that's a small group and everybody gets a chance to be with each other and share that experience together. A larger group might lose a little bit of that, might water down that whole group experience a little bit.
So I know you're in the teen and kid outward bound business, but would you ever do this for adults?
Well, one of the things I'll back you up a little bit. So the outward bound, we get this all the time. So we are not outward bound. So outward
What?
bound, real quick. No, outward bound does outdoor wilderness experiences.
Okay.
So the outward bound concept is to knock you down and build you back up. And I did an outward bound course, and I did one, but I was not going to do two.
Mhm.
Our business is being able to create an experience where kids are challenged but also thrive in that environment, and they love that concept over there of being able to share a group experience. And so some are more challenging, some are less challenging, but it's all about the group experience. And so um, but we're not OB, and I have to correct a lot of moms on that because Outward Bound and we're closer to Knowles than Outward Bound, but even so, I've really kind of changed post COVID. That we've seen the huge surge in us is trekking in Europe or being in and again in Africa, as opposed to a really challenging backpacking trip in Colorado or in Idaho or in Alaska. So that's changed a little bit.
So you need to coin a phrase that represents your business because has elements of that outdoor leadership. I think I
Right.
just
Absolutely.
grouped it into outward bound because it feels like, well, you're going out and you're having
Right.
an experience, but I see what you mean. It
It's
is
uh, we
different.
call we call it adventure travel for
Yeah.
teens. So just adventure travel, which is different than wilderness travel, which is different than a really harsh, hard, physically challenging. And I understand the concept behind those other companies, but they're so what I found that kids are getting softer over the last 30 years. And that's true in a lot of ways. And the phone probably has a lot to do with that. And but kids are not willing to do the hard things anymore. Some of them are not willing to do that. Adults are not willing to do the hard thing anymore. And so we've seen that. So companies like Knowles and Outward Bound that were doing the hard things are finding it more challenging to be able to find people that want to say yes to that. So for us, can it be challenging? Yes. Can it be fun? Absolutely. Can it be transformative? 100%. And that's if we have that concept over there about how do they feel when they walk away? Do they say, "Oh, I never want to do that again"? That's not what we want. We want them to be bawling in the airport saying, "Oh my gosh, I don't want this to end." And they're crying. And I've seen them almost where they have, where you're crying, you can't even breathe and you're hyperventilating and you need like a brown baggie to breathe into to keep from passing out. That's what I want. And I kind of love it. And but it is an experience that we want when people leave their trip. My goal, my hope is that we'd love for them to come back, but we realize that's not realistic. But we hope that they walk away saying, that was the coolest thing that I've done up to this point in my life. And my favorite questions is ask them is, what's the best day that you've ever had? What's the best day you've ever had in your life? So as a as a older mom now over there, just what is the best day that you've ever had? And it's interesting to talk to a 22-year-old or a 15-year-old, and can we give them the best day that they've ever had up to that point in their life? And we absolutely can.
That's amazing, and as you were saying, what was the best day of your life? I was going through these moments that I can remember, and aside from the key moments like marriage and birth of my children and stuff, it was like being in Gokyo, which is a 16-day hike in Everest National Park, and I think there's something about the awe, like the way your body feels that attaches the memory with just like, "I wanna go back there."
Yeah, yeah. And we realize oftentimes we can't recreate that. but you have that feeling and that memory that you have. And what I tell folks all the time, I want them to ideally think about this in a week or a month or a year, but really I want them to think about this in 10 years or 25 years. There's a great book called Die with Zero that a guy recommended to me, and it's part of this. The concept is die with zero in your bank account because you've given your money away to your inheritance, to your children, you've given money away to charity, and you have enough to survive on, but you don't have enough in the account. But it's about die with zero regrets. And I think a lot of times as we get older, and I'm seeing this now with my contemporaries, oh, I can't go climb Kilimanjaro because I got a bad knee, or I can't take the time off. And what this book also talks about is having those experiences when you're younger, when you have your health and you have those opportunities over there that you can really share that time because it is harder. My siblings can't do it. I'd like to think I could still do a lot of it, but there's certain things that I can't. And but we want kids to realize, hey, have these experiences now while you can, and you will look back and fondly say, hey, I did that. So one of the big things that we're dealing with right now is FOMO, fear of missing out for boys. Do you have sons?
Oh, yeah. What, they
Okay,
don't wanna leave home because they might miss out with their
that
friends?
absolutely. And so FOMO it's a real thing. So girls are taking over the world. And girls, we have, uh, if you look at our number of in our office, it's dominated by women. If you look at, the folks that are signing up early, it's girls. The guys will drag their feet, fear of missing out. And what they're going to miss out on is an experience that they will remember for the rest of their lives. Oftentimes they could do that. So we have to be able to convince them. So we've got a campaign getting ready to get started about what does FOMO look like? And FOMO looks like dancing in the rain in Albania. FOMO looks like, hugging somebody at the summit of Kilimanjaro. FOMO looks like sharing a meal on the side of a river in Idaho. That's what FOMO's like. And so with these kids being able to do that and realize, okay, I don't do it now. I might not ever do it. And so being able to talk about, that trek that you did at Everest, you'll remember that when you're 70, 80 years of age
And
and fondly.
we've talked about we wanna bring the kids there, but our youngest is only 9, and she needs to be just a little bit older to be able to tolerate, I think,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
strenuous it is.
Yeah.
But I so if a kid, let's say a parent wants their kid to go for all of the obvious reasons, but the kid is resistant because of FOMO or because of nervousness, do you think the parent should push?
So parents do push. So, um, well, here are a couple things. So Hunter, my daughter went to a great camp in North Carolina for 6 years, and it's my favorite girls' camp in the South. But I told her she's not going to go back because her old man owns Moondance, and so she could do it. She could go on Moondance for free. She was kicking a little bit, but I said, trust me. She went on 9 trips. She has friends from all over the U.S.
Oh my
She's in
gosh.
college now and has friends, and she's getting ready to go to a deb party next week, and for one of her girlfriends over there. So I pushed a little bit. I didn't push too much, but I pushed a little bit. Sometimes it needs a little bit of a push. It needs a little bit of a challenge. We're going to keep them safe. We're going to keep them well fed. We're going to keep them in good hands. And but we're not going to necessarily keep them comfortable. So they need to learn how to be comfortable when they're uncomfortable. And that's a good lesson in life to be able to have. How do you get comfortable when things are a little bit uncomfortable? And it's not really leaving the comfort zone. There's a great guy named Alex Honnold he's a famous climber, did Free Solo, the movie Free Solo. He talks about expanding the comfort zone. So you just kind of stretch what you're comfortable with, and so you're not really leaving that, you're just expanding that. It's good for kids to be able to have that. Now, let me also say too that we have some pretty strict guidelines, and if folks break the rules, consequences happen. So we had 2 years ago, we heard about some kids that snuck out in Thailand, and went to a bar and got something to drink. And I heard about it, and there were 8 kids involved in that. There were 3 or 4 kids that were not. As soon as we heard about it, we're going to send 8 home. We found out that we're not just 8, there were 9 in the other group that came home. 17 kids were sent home. And that was a good message for us to be able to tell parents is that, hey, and some of these kids were friends with my daughter, and it did not matter at all. And we had parents that called up and said, "Hey, they only had one sip," or it did not matter at all. The rules were this, and we sent 17 kids home, and then we immediately sent out a message to everybody else, and we had umpteen, responses. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for fulfilling this role over here that you said, hey, this is what we're going to do if you break these rules. And so parents understand that, and they want that because we know I've been involved in the kid business for 50 years. I know what's going on with teenagers at a lot of places, but it can't go on when we're responsible for them, when they're in our care.
Yeah.
None of that can happen. Um, and let me share also something else that if folks want to get involved. Are you in Atlanta? Is that where
I'm
you live
I'm out
now?
on the West Coast now.
Oh, you are.
Yep.
Well, Atlanta is great, and it's also tough for us because we get a lot of Atlanta kids, and so we freeze a lot of those spots over there for Atlanta kids because we get inundated. If we took all those Atlanta kids, we have too much, and so we open up enrollment in August, and we wait till a certain day. It's like the 25th of August, and then we open it up at 9 o'clock, and then the phones just or the phones didn't even blow up anymore. It's the internet blows up for us to the point where a lot of trips are full that day for particular cities. And so if you're a 15-year-old girl from Atlanta per se, it's hard to get on a trip unless you've been on one before, unless you can find something that might not be your first or your second or your third, or maybe even your fourth trip choice. And so we believe and we found that kids just want to experience Moondance, not necessarily going to a certain destination or certain activities, but they just want to be with other kids and have this experience. And so it's worked out quite well. But we also have to manage our wait list. And so we've got 250, 300 on a wait list right now. And we have space, but we don't for, we're waiting for the guys to come in, and the guys will come in. We know we've got about 800, 900 guys on board already, but we know when they're going to come in later on. And it's typically January, February after the holidays and going, oh, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And that might be a little bit of a push from mom and dad.
So
The girl spots are almost completely full for next summer.
oh, wow. So then are you still trying to grow this business, or are you now just working on efficiencies?
A couple things. One, trying to be more efficient in everything that we're doing, which is has been nice. I'd like to see it grow a little bit more, but I'm also at the age too when I'm thinking about that transition, that succession over there, and I've been talking to some folks over there who are much more interested in seeing could it grow in the kid market, could it grow in the adult market, and so the adult market is. I've heard this for years. The heck with the kids. What about us? And there is a massive desire to go and do these fun things that the kids are doing,
Yeah.
but then to make that commitment is harder. And so to say, okay, I'm going to go and so we've done a handful of adult trips over the years, but it's harder and harder to do that. The adult industry is blown up. The adult industry is massive. That is an area that we've talked about. If we can really kind of focus on not only fine tuning what the kids are doing, but also start to get into the adult market too, that would be a great opportunity there. That market for us, they're probably 40 to 55-year-old parents. And my contemporaries, they're all done. They're all aged out. All their kids are in their 30s now, and they're all grandparents. And physically, they can't do a lot. But that 40 to 55-year-old crowd absolutely can. And certainly that there's a younger crowd also that may not be married, that may not have kids, that would desire to do some things too. So we're looking at all of that, but nothing yet. And as I'd love to do this for the rest of my life, but I can't. And
Yeah.
um, and I also realize that the business is bigger than me, and I'd love to be able to find somebody that is as passionate and wants to take this for another 30 years.
Yeah. I'm sure you will
Yeah,
find that ideal person when that ideal company that is going to take over the reins when that time comes, and I'm sure you'll find the right fit. So, you mentioned there's opportunity out there. There's clearly space in the market for anyone that's listening in who's aspiring to be an entrepreneur, and maybe they too are an adventure enthusiast, or they're a rock climber, or a mountain biker, or a camp leader, for example. Like, what advice would you give them for creating a business around giving life experiences like this?
I think the one thing. there are a lot of dreamers out there. There are a lot of people that have ideas, and there are a lot of people that say, "Oh gosh, I'd like to do this and this and this." And I've heard it forever. So it's about believing in yourself. It's about you've got to grind. You can't get knocked down and fail to get back up. You must always get back up. Um, Learning as much about how a small business operates, learning how a larger business operates. I wish I'd taken more courses in business when I was younger, so I had to kind of learn on the fly. This has been uh, a business school over the last 30 years. But what I would say is, if you are passionate about something, if you believe in something, if you really want to do it, you'll miss an opportunity if you don't go after it. And my dad missed an opportunity he regretted until the day that he died, that he missed an opportunity to become an entrepreneur when he was younger. He had a family, didn't want to take the risk. He talked about that, just before he passed away. That lesson over there was really loud and clear to me, is that uh, I might not have known a lot, but I loved kids and I loved the outdoors and I wanted to make a run at it. And if I didn't make it year two, I'd have been okay with it. What would have been disappointing to me is if I never had tried, if I never said, I'm going to try to do this, and gotten into something else. And I can't tell you how many other friends that never try. And so I'm not quite sure, Andy. I don't know how I was fortunate to be able to do this. Sometimes I'm on an island, and everybody that works for me, I adore everybody that works for me, but they're all Gen Zs, and so I'm surrounded by the all folks in their 20s, which is a great, and I think maybe keeping me a little bit younger. Um, but it's also they are passionate about what we're doing. They're passionate about our business, and they're the ones that give me the energy to be able to successfully operate all of this. And so finding some really good, smart people that can help you out. And you hear it all the time. Find people that are smarter than you. That's pretty easy to do. These young people coming out of school are so bright, so dynamic, and looking for a purpose to have in life as opposed to chasing that dollar. And there will always be people that are going to chase the dollar. But what we're finding, a lot of the younger um, individuals coming into the workforce that look at purpose with meaning and want to make something more than just a paycheck.
Well, I think they're shortcutting what a lot of people, at least I feel in my generation, made a mistake with, which was we chased money a lot and we're circling back to purpose later. But Gen Z and Gen Alpha looks like they're kind of just keeping it aligned the whole way
Yeah,
through. It's
yeah.
amazing. So,
Yeah.
just as a final question here, if you could go back and talk with yourself when you were in your early 20s, what life wisdom would you give yourself that really isn't about business at all?
I think I found out, and again, I talked about it earlier. My grandparents had this camp. I went back as a 19-year-old, and 2 days after being there, I thought, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And I've talked to a lot of folks. Nobody really had that at 19. Nobody really kind of had an idea what they wanted to do at 19, at least in people that I've spoken to. And I never left that. I never said, I want to do something else. And so following your dream over there, hindsight, probably could have taken a couple more courses in college that might have helped me a little bit more. I loved my time at Lovett. I loved getting to know the kids. I loved getting to know the families, but it didn't prepare me for being an entrepreneur. And so 12 years at Lovett gave me the experience of working with kids and working with people, but not on the business side of it. So as a small business, we're a small business. I needed to learn a lot of that along the way. So, but also, if I'm looking at a 19-year-old me and a 67-year-old me, I've loved the fact that I've never said no. I never said, I'm not going to do this. I don't believe that this is going to work. It was always yes. And that's why I was at Love It for 12 years. And that's why I've been doing this for 30. The toughest part about thinking about succession is kind of leaving what I love doing. And that's probably the greatest gift that I've been given is just I wake up every day and I love what we get to do. And it's hadn't wavered, even more so now than it was 30 years ago. 30 years ago, there were a lot of bumps on the road. There are not as many bumps, but we're just bigger, but it's
You
helped out.
you've really found a magical winning spot because you get
Well,
fulfillment from this. It energizes you. It really helps kids in their future lives, and you just think about, like, that unlimited domino that you're setting off. I am so amazed. And the reason why I even thought to reach out to you was we were in the airport and I saw a group of kids wearing Moondance sweatshirts. They must have been coming back from one of these
aw
trips. And I
awesome.
was with my family and I was like, "I know the guy that started that." And, oh my gosh, I'm wonder how it's doing, and then I looked it up and you're everywhere, and I was just like, "Wow, you really did it." And just thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story with us and all of this incredible wisdom.
Well, love reconnecting with you, and I love telling the story, but even more so, I love reconnecting with you. And I've been so fortunate. I just had another Brooks Beard. If you remember Brooks Beard and Alyssa
Yeah,
Portman, they just their son just signed up yesterday, which is wonderful. So I get a chance to reconnect with a lot of people, and that's been humbling for me too. So thank you for all of this. I mean, I'm humbled by being able to chat with you. So it's great fun, and please tell your whole family I said hello.
I will, and everyone that I know from Love It. I will let them know that
There,
I've talked with you, yeah.
well, give you tell all your girlfriends I said hello too. So I remember all of them well. So it has been a few years, and it's great to see that they're all moms, and life's doing pretty well for everybody there. So
And I hope
very
that my kids are on one of your trips at some point in the future too.
well. I hope so. I hope so.
All right,
Well, so
thanks
great to
so
talk
much,
to you.
Hayes. It was so good to
Okay,
talk to
thanks,
you.
Annie.
Bye.
All right.